Sure. So, yes, born in the UK, born in London, raised in South London. And it's funny because I always think whenever I counsel anybody or anybody asks me about careers in general and life direction in general, is that probably what you think you're going to do is not what you're going to do. And that was certainly the case with me. And I remember when I was finishing up high school, my dream was to be a teacher and to be a credentialed teacher. And my chosen subject was biology. And I never actually went on to study biology to that level. And instead, I ended up studying things like accounting and economics and business. And it was really the mentorship that I had from the headmaster of my high school that encouraged me to get a broader view on life before I settled in on something that I was very passionate about. And that was one of the best pieces of advice I could have, because that did broaden my horizon. I went out and looked at other things and realized that I had not only a liking, but I had a great affinity, and I was skilled at things like numbers and economics and logical reasoning. So that then led me to study those things. After high school, I was at Polytechnic of the South Bank, and then my first job ended up being with Barclays Bank. And that, again, was not because I had the wild vision to be a banker, but it was a good job and it was a fit for my skill set, and it seemed to have good prospects. And one of the things that I wanted to do in selecting an employer was to work for an international company, because it had also been a dream of mine to travel the world and to experience living in another country. So I joined Barclays Bank, did a few entry-level positions there, ended up working in the bank's trading room, traded the euro-dollar book and for a little while, and then really focused on currency and interest rate risk management, which I did for the bank, and also ended up doing as a service, advisory service for the bank's large corporate clients. And so in that particular world where it is very speculative, it is very short term. Traders will look at what is going to be the move in the next 10 minutes and how can I make money, but my vision was really, how can the long-term economic impact of a currency or interest rate move affect somebody's business, and how can we protect against that? So I had the great fortune to work with a number of large corporations, divisions of the United Nations in Europe. And I eventually did get my itchy feet and wanted to move away from London. And so in the late 80s, 1988, I was offered a 2-year assignment to New York, which I grabbed willingly, went off to New York and did essentially the same job in New York that I had been doing in London, but with American corporations. And the geographical area that I was covering was primarily the West Coast. So it was Silicon Valley. And of course, Silicon Valley in the late 80s, early 90s, looked very different from the way it looks today. And that kind of gave me more of a flavor for the innovative side of business, because I was working with a whole different set of organizations with different challenges and different things that I needed to look at and help with. So my 2 years in New York turned into 5 years. And right around year 4, I met my wife, who is a native Californian, who herself was about to depart for an assignment with her company to the Netherlands. So we had a long distance relationship between New York and California at first, and then between New York and Amsterdam for a while. And I, at that point, had a real liking and a flavor for innovative companies. I think the term disruptive technology didn't even exist back then, but it was the sort of thing that just really excited me and appealed to me. And I realized that the trading area of Barclays Bank was not going to really be able to give me that. So I planned on leaving the bank, and actually fortuitously the bank did a downsizing right around the mid-1990s. And so I left the bank, lived in Amsterdam for about a year, and supported my wife in her career. And then when her assignment ended, we could pretty much choose where we wanted to live. We could have stayed longer in Amsterdam. We could have gone to London, where, I certainly had some roots with family and career. We could have gone back to New York, but what made sense was to come here to California, because my wife Diane had a job to come to, and she had a condominium here, so we had a place to live. And 1994 was a pretty challenging period to find a job. So it took me a good 6-7 months before I landed at Silicon Valley Bank. And I was the treasurer at Silicon Valley Bank for 5 years. Wonderful institution right here in the heart of Silicon Valley that lends primarily to venture-backed companies and technology companies. And the end of my time there, the next bug bite that I had, if you like, was the dot-com world and the online world. And I found this tiny little startup in a one-room office above a Hallmark card store in Palo Alto that nobody had ever heard of, called PayPal. And everybody said it would never succeed and it would never work. And well, that's a whole different story we can talk about in more detail. My tenure at PayPal was actually not that long, certainly not as long as some of the other people there. But when I left there, I was then hired by what was then Nokia Venture Partners, which was the first venture investor in PayPal. That got me into the mobile world and into venture capital. And that's the area that I've been working in pretty much the rest of the time. Venture capital is an area that is very prominent here in Silicon Valley. We have the huge iconic venture capital firms on Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park, and then we have many hundreds of smaller firms, most of which I've tended to work with, or many of which I've tended to work with in the smaller category. And then done a number of independent consulting engagements, and for a number of years was with Greenough Consulting Group, that was a provider to venture capital and startup companies. So I've been pretty much the outsourced CFO, renter CFO, CFO to go for about the last 15 years. And what's been incredibly rewarding about that is that it's opened up this horizon of a huge amount of companies, and has really given great insight into what companies are doing and what technology is being worked on. And even though I myself, I'm not an engineer, I'm a finance guy by background. Finance, accounting, corporate governance is my world. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a technologist. But if you live in Silicon Valley, it affects you, and it affects you somehow, some way or another. So that kind of brings me up to today. And currently, I still have a few consulting contracts in my own consulting practice, and I have a number of board seats on some companies, which I certainly enjoy having the equity interest in the company and being able to guide and steward those companies, hopefully to even more success than they are at today.